Begg, Associate Professor Cameron Bishop, and a whole bunch of the team of treatment, including many of the artists and workers on the project, to be here tonight to launch what I think is going to be an outstandingly interesting and exciting third installation or third installment of the treatment project. I'm currently standing on Bunurong land, and I would like to begin by paying my respects to ancestors past, present and emergent, and acknowledge any Indigenous persons that's with us tonight and welcome them to our session. We've got a fairly full and interesting program to deliver for you tonight, aside from the actual launch itself, and to unfold a little bit about the project and what it's going to be. We also have a short film that Cameron's made, which is a really beautiful, in a sense, anthology of previous treatments, including some elements of the upcoming version, treatment number 3. So we're going to have a little Q&A session with a number of our artists, which we're delighted who've been able to join us tonight. We're also going to have some conversations with some very key players at Melbourne Water, including Paul Bellasone, who's been a hugely important champion of this project since 2015 when it began. But without further ado, I would like to welcome another Melbourne Water person, Greg Bain, who is the Manager of Community Connections at Melbourne Water. And Greg is going to formally welcome us.
Thanks, David. And thanks for having me. I'd also like to just start with an acknowledgement of country. So I'd wish to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land on which we're all meeting virtually tonight, and pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging. I'm joining you today from Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country in the east of Melbourne. And I'd also like to pay my respects to the Wadawurrung people, who are the traditional custodians on the land on which the Western Treatment Plant operates. And we'll talk a little bit more about the Western Treatment Plant. And also I'd like to acknowledge any other Aboriginal people who might be joining us today on the session. Just a little bit about Melbourne Water and our link to the Western Treatment Plant, which I think Paul will talk a little bit more about later. And obviously our link to this exciting Treatment 3 project. In Melbourne, a safe, clean and healthy environment is essential to our way of life. Melbourne Water is integral to all parts of the water cycle that are essential to this way of life, from providing clean drinking water, keeping our rivers, creeks and catchments healthy, and planning to manage flooding, and also treating sewage. Through an extensive network of underground pipes and sewers, we manage and treat our city's sewage, ensuring the health of our environment, the community and our families. So the Western Treatment Plant, which is a really core part of that sewage process, treats approximately 52% of Melbourne sewage. But it does so much more and is really a truly special place. At WTP, which is short for Western Treatment Plant, sewage treatment, agriculture and biodiversity meet resource recovery, education and ecotourism. That's why we're excited to begin showcasing WTP as the location for Treatment 3, or one of the key locations, whilst drawing attention to the crucial work the Western Treatment Plant does in the life of Melbourne as a city. Thank you, David.
Thank you so much, Greg. So we're going to begin our session by introducing some of our artists, and just maybe before we do that, to unfold a little bit about what this project is, and perhaps how Treatment 3 is a different beast to the previous 2 treatments, which took place in the inaugural run in 2015 and then repeated in 2017. And then a reasonable gap between then and now, through which we've negotiated COVID and assorted crazy events. So it's super exciting for us to come back and bring another treatment into the mix after what's been an extraordinarily challenging period. I'll bring Cam in a moment to maybe unfold some of his thoughts as well, but Treatment 3 is a distinctly different approach to our engagement with public art in the west of Melbourne, in that it expands the remit of our engagement. We have previously worked entirely within the Western Treatment Plant. We've looked at its histories, its engineering, its environmental engagement. We've talked about the communities that have lived in that space. We're very fascinated by that incredible infrastructure and the people that have made it over the past 100 years. But Treatment 3 actually goes further this time. We decided that we would try and engage with a longer stretch of the sewage process, taking us all the way back to Spotswood and the old pumping station in Spotswood, which was where the sewage in Melbourne was pumped up to that spot and then went down slowly towards Werribee. So the treatment project actually this year will begin with a number of commissions that are taking place in Scienceworks and in Spotswood. And in that sense, we're very interested in the idea of that passage that runs all the way from Spotswood down to the Western Treatment Plant, which is officially known now as the Federation Trail. And our interest, I guess, is largely thinking through how we can expand the engagement of public art beyond the Western Treatment Plant, but to connect it through to the Western Treatment Plant. So we begin in Spotswood and at Scienceworks, and then we conclude in the end of this project with a very exciting event, a nocturnal and day event that straddles a 24-hour period at the Western Treatment Plant in April. So Cam, I'd like to bring you in perhaps to maybe unfold a little bit about some of our thinking for this next treatment.
Yeah, so that's thanks, David. So I guess in terms of origin stories, we've been working with Paul now for almost 10 years on developing this project. They're always carefully planned things. We allow artists time to research sites and respond to them with some degree of agency, knowing that we at the Western Treatment Plant are working on an operational site, which has all kinds of sensitivities, notwithstanding the technologies, the wildlife, and the extraordinary bird life down there, which in this run we will most definitely be concentrating on. But as David began to explain, we're kind of backing up the system, I guess, and we're working back up the pipeline towards Spotswood, through Brooklyn, and into the pumping station. And we've got some extraordinary artists working with us, still making, in production, editing, and looking to work closely with all of our partners on this this rather ambitious public art project, which now actually involves real places, real communities outside of the Western Treatment Plant. So we envisage the pipeline as much as a social line as an actual piece of infrastructure, something that can bind communities and different cultures together. So we've asked artists to go out and explore those communities, and that's what we want to talk to some of them too about tonight. So the actually, before I go on, I should acknowledge our partners in this project. And of course, they start with Bunurong and Wadawurrung people, West Gate Neighbourhood Fund, Melbourne Water, of course, whose infrastructure we are celebrating, Hobsons Bay and Wyndham City Councils, Scienceworks, and the tireless Jonathan Shearer, who has done so much for us, as well as all the extraordinary people connected to those organisations that we've been working with. We're slightly nervous about what's to come in the next 5 weeks, but we are really excited. And it's been the production phase of the project that we get most excited and start to think, okay, this could actually work. So for all the bureaucratic challenges that we have to overcome, it's amazing to sit down with artists and watch them work. So I guess in light of that, I would like to introduce an artist that we can chat to that actually almost that really is kickstarting the project in the next, well, today officially, Linda Tegg, who we've been working with now for about a year in bringing her project to light. So Linda, can you just jump on and turn on your mic?
Hi. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I thought since we're having this conversation, I might share a little like some documentation I've been making along the way of this very process-driven work. So I might just drop that into the chat. So like it's a web kind of site, so you can, if you wish to sort of look at it while I'm chatting, or multitask, please do.
Thanks, Linda. Yeah, so just to situate you, you're actually just across the road from Scienceworks at a corner at an old industrial site on the corner of, is it Booker Street and
Hudson's Road.
Hudson Road? Yeah. Now, can you give us an insight into what you've been doing the last 6 months or so?
Yeah, well, it's so it's a vacant lot, sort of opposite Scienceworks, and it's a very vibrant vacant lot. It's like full of life, and there's 2 rows of concrete sleepers that run a length of 65 meters down the center of the site. And I thought about leaning into this boundary condition and like how I might be able to like enhance what is already a lively site, to like make it more biodiverse, to sort of attune into those types of things. So I decided to establish a species-rich grassland plant community in this little strip that runs right down the center of the site, and that meant shifting the conditions slightly, and then what seems like not such a, something that I could talk through quite quickly.
Yeah.
Ended up, it's been a process. It's been very challenging and stimulating as I've tried to bring one plant community into an established plant community, and I've found that it's been like a very it's been a process of boundary making. It's like working through contingencies, and because it's so led by the action, responding to all these other really powerful agents on the site. It's and so that's really the materiality of the work and how it's forming. So the plants are coming along, and the initial impetus of the work was to establish this species-rich plant community of Indigenous plants. And while this vacant lot is still sort of on the cusp of being transformed, that in that time frame, in this sort of space, it sort of slips between other structures, that we could grow these plants and then collect the seeds. So, and then working in dialogue with the landscape architects that are going to be informing the longer term vision of the site, like how these actions can start to inform like the future of how plants might inhabit that space.
Linda, one of the lovely things of your work is the way it plays with time, particularly around the framing of the art experience. So audiences will come to it for a very particular period, but your work began months and months and months ago and will continue after this particular period with treatment. So I wonder if maybe you could talk a little bit about time and the way in which you've really played and pushed with the nature of how time operates in public art projects.
Yeah, it's I've sort of been thinking a lot in terms of different types of time frames or types of time, like whether it be synchronous or cyclical, like types of time that have been really resonating with my work. And I've been, those of us have been working on the project, so I'm not the only person maintaining it, but we've been out there in the public view since October, and there'll be, and like we're attuned to the seasons because we're working with plants and they have to go through their cycles, and so we have, we agreed to establish the plants for a particular duration, but that is going to push well and truly beyond the initial scope of the treatment project, and is, you know, really tied to when construction on the site begins. And I've sort of been thinking, or been feeling maybe over the last couple of years, that, you know, I feel like the one thing that I can count on is delays in one way or other when it comes to many people having to get together to decide, say, a future of a site. So I feel quite optimistic about the future of this plant community.
Well, this,
and also,
yes,
sorry, Cam.
this work goes on to will help to reshape that urban renewal project that Cadence Property Group, who we've worked closely with, as well as the landscape architects and designers, for years to come. So in that sense, we're making a project that is not just confined to the window of the next 5 weeks, but 50 years.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm looking forward to further, like we've had fabulous conversations with the landscape architects at the beginning of the project, and we're going to tune in again on the site in a couple of weeks, and to just to see how this conversation and this sort of back and forth interplay, yeah, how it's going to work, or, you know, because it's happening. So,
yes.
But we're right in it.
Yeah, I guess we can forecast ahead to April 1, when April Fool's Day, when we're going to meet on site and check out this work in a different, experience it in a different kind of way, actually enter the site and walk around it and talk to you and some of the other stakeholders involved in the project. So thanks for the work you've done so far. And there is work to come, I know.
Yeah, it's been a rich experience. Yeah.
Thanks, I'm glad. We'll move on, and great pleasure to welcome Zanny Begg with us all the way from Sydney, or just south of Sydney, New South Wales. Zanny is an artist that we commissioned to engage with an aspect of the Scienceworks site. And as is always the case when you're trying to kind of grow projects, it's very much allowing the artist to follow their nose, but also to try and, you know, find a way into a particular site. And Zanny's project will be taking place at Scienceworks, along with Robert Andrews' commission, and they'll be in a degree of proximity to each other, but not right next to each other. But Zanny, it'd be, again, fantastic to have had you on this journey. Maybe would you like to just introduce for people a little bit about how you've come to make the work that you have made?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm speaking to you from Wodi country in Dharawal, just near Wollongong. So I've been visiting the Scienceworks site, I don't know, for months now, or maybe even a year. How long has it been?
Yeah, it'd be easily a year, I think, Zanny.
I mean, COVID did slow things down a little bit, but and as David said, I did follow my nose. I mean, sort of metaphorically and literally, it is a sewage site, so sometimes it can be quite pungent. But yeah, I just was really fascinated by the site, and it's so beautiful. And to be able to see a lot of the places that maybe sometimes the general public doesn't get to see, which are in a semi-ruinous state, but really elegant and beautiful, that sort of 1890s old industrial architecture. It's like a cathedral in there. And yeah, I just was looking at the history of the site and the history of the area, and one sort of one aspect of it that kind of caught my eye was that it was the place where the Prisoner was filmed. So when the riot at Blackmore, I'm old enough to have grown up watching Prisoner, which was a big show in the 70s and the 80s. So, you know, probably people today would think maybe more about Wentworth, but, you know, it was one of the most popular TV series in Australia's television history. It ran for over a decade, and the sort of ending sequence of the show happened at the pumping station, where one of the main characters, Rita Connors, who's a bikie chick, and Spotswood is quite famous for its bikies, starts this riot that ends up with the prison being burnt down. So I was really interested in that moment. And so I reached out to Glenda Lidscott, who is the actor who played Rita Connors 37 years ago. And amazingly, she agreed to come back to Blackwood, back to the pumping station, and to reenact some of the sequences of the famous riot sequence of Blackmore's. So that was a really special starting spot for the project that I ended up working on.
Thanks, Zanny. It's been really interesting to again follow the process, because you had some really interesting but quite distinct ideas that were different from that early in the piece, particularly around certain sort of gendered histories of the site, and some very interesting stories about the female worker who worked on that site, who was, I think, the first engineer. So there's been a really interesting research process for you in terms of kind of following different tangents before you've arrived at this one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a really research-focused artist, I guess, and I did look at a lot of those aspects. I guess the sort of common theme in the work that I do is, like, I like to work across time. So if I'm looking at something in the history, like the story of Lucy, who was I think she was a biochemical engineer that worked at the pumping station. I found her story really fascinating. But I guess what I like to look at things that can resonate into the present. And so, I guess with her story, I didn't find, I was totally fascinated by it, but I didn't find those direct resonances. So it kind of fed into the general research. And in a way, you could say it's informed the work that I've made, because Lucy had to have a special toilet built for herself and a special office, because she was actually the only female employee of the several hundred that worked at the pumping station in the 19th century. And prisoner is, the kind of the motto that started Prisoner was, if prison's hell for a man, what would it be like for a woman? And so it was kind of very unique. And I guess what attracted me to it when I was really little watching it on my neighbour's TV was that it was female dominated, in kind of what TV being a male dominated land. So in a way, there's a sort of echo there from some of the experiences that Lucy had into the work that I ended up making. I guess also for me, there's another kind of resonance, which is that the pumping station was built as a piece of public infrastructure, and it was built for the common good. So it was very expensive at the time, and it was built to clean up the suburbs in Melbourne, and to sort of create a city that didn't, bring diseases and so forth. And so it was a government piece of infrastructure that was built with that kind of collective good in mind. And right now there's been this whole conversation about extending the Dame Phyllis Ross Correctional Centre, which is a very expensive piece of public money. But I guess what I'm probing is that for public good? And so that, the big expenses that, that the state government in Victoria is spending, it's sort of shifted from something in the 1890s, which was about this idea of a sewer and cleaning up and sort of, making the suburbs livable for everyone, to now this sort of notion around corrections and prisons, which is sort of more about punitive rather than sort of helping everyone. So I was sort of interested in some of those tensions, I guess, which resonated out from the site as well. So, it was a fairly loose process of research, but it kind of led me in that direction in the end.
And some of those tensions that you're talking about are actually drawn out in the film, like the work, the way you weave fiction and documentary into the work you've done.
Yeah, so I work with so the scenes from Prisoner. I did rewatch, like, I spent 3 days watching. There's so many Prisoner. I thought I'd watch them all, but that would have taken like months. So anyway, I sort of spent 3 days watching Prisoner to sort of refresh my memory. And then I actually wrote the scenes from memory. Like, I had sort of rewatched them since I was a kid, but I wasn't going to like directly sort of get the script. So that idea of that sort of personal mythology of that, I get it a bit wrong, but there was that iconic scene when Rita Connors first arrives at Blackmore and she's made to stand on the line. So, most people who know the show would remember that scene. But yeah, I was interested in that slippage between fact and fiction. So, there are some former inmates or prison rights activists who are interviewed in the film, and some of them also act in the sequences. So that's sort of breaking down of who's an actor and who's the sort of more documentary side of it. And that sort of feeds into, I guess, what I feel is that sort of mythologizing of the prison industrial complex in Australia, which, stems from us as a penal colony, is how colonial Australia started, but it's really embedded deep in our psyche in the fact that prisoner was so popular and it was a massive export all around the world, as this idea of Australia as this sort of prison. And, today it's in the way that, I guess certain groups are still targeted and criminalized in our society, which is sort of around that mythologizing, I guess, of what's criminal and what's not criminal. So I'm kind of probing and exploring all those themes.
Zanny, one of the key things about, I guess, the treatment project more broadly is that care around place engagement or site responsiveness. And the treatment, the Scienceworks pumping station has gazillions of different large spaces, small spaces that are, office focused. You had a kind of an abundance of possibilities in terms of choosing not only where you would make it, but also now where you're going to show it. Could you tell us a little bit about how you've arrived at the location for where the work will be shown and why you wanted to put it there?
Sure. So, well, maybe I can take one step back from that, David. Just where we chose to film it was that courtyard, which is this sort of iconic industrial institutional space, and I think that's why it was chosen by the film team for Prisoner, because it was also Mad Max was also filmed there as well, which is worth sort of pointing out because it has that very institutional character. So I chose that site to film it. When it came to choosing where to show it, we picked the commander's room, and that's where the sort of pinnacle of when Rita Connors has the riot, she takes the commander's room, which I guess is what you would do if you were trying to take over an institution, is that you take the superintendents or the command, the sort of person who runs the place's room. I mean, obviously it's abandoned and it's derelict, so it's an entirely fictitious riot that she leads, and it's a fictitious platform from which she makes her demands. But I think that's sort of part of it. And we're showing the work back in that room. So I guess for people watching it, there might be a sort of eerie sense of that they're standing in the space where it was filmed. And they've become part of the mythologizing and the fiction.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Very much looking forward to it. So just to draw everyone's attention to the program, that's going to be launching on April 5, and that will be the on-site launch for Treatment 3, where everyone will get to enjoy Linda's work, Zanny's work, and Robert Andrews' work, all in that precinct around Scienceworks Spotswood. So you can register for that event on our website, which we're also launching tonight. It went live today, treatment3.org.au. So stay tuned to all the events that are coming up down the line in the next 5 weeks.
In a delicious segue, Cameron, I think we're now going to move into the website.
Excellent, David. Are you sharing your screen?
I can do that. I was, yep. Let me do that and I'll.
So maybe, Paul, we could bring you into the frame here as we bring that up. Paul Bellasone, who's a man that knows a lot about the history of Melbourne Water and its infrastructure, right from the dams up in the Yarra Ranges through the Yarra River or Birrarung and down to the Western Treatment Plant. Paul, I know you've been with Melbourne Water for some time. Maybe you could just talk about your current role and some of the background with the organisation that you've had.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Cam. Welcome, everyone. Paul Bellasone, I lead the heritage team at Melbourne Water. It's a dual role in some ways. Day to day, it's dealing with the compliance, but I think the other part of it is forging some connections, community connections, and I think which leads us to really talking about treatment. Here we are, tonight. So on the engagement side of things, we're always on the lookout for opportunities. and opportunities to really present heritage in a different light. Well, we're not interested in heritage for the sake of heritage, and certainly moving away from that institutional approach of the past. We're almost like risk takers in some ways, and I think this collaboration, which I'll now sort of touch on, is pretty much very much aligned with where we want to go as a business. So if I can just probably touch on some personal reflections on certainly the broader treatment program and not beyond just T3. So as touched on by Cam and David at the very start, T3 is certainly more ambitious than the previous two iterations. As mentioned by David, stepping right outside of the boundary of the Western Treatment Plant, and pretty much now showcasing the three principal components of the early sewage system. And Zanny, touched on the Spotswood. So those components are Scienceworks or Spotswood Pumping Station, the main outfall sewer, and then the Western Treatment Plant. And to me, treatment on the whole pays homage to this to the foresight of our forebearers, building a network that continues to pretty much underpin our vision of enhancing life and livability. Treatment continues to activate and bring life to this marvelous engineering heritage that for over a century has continued to faithfully serve Melbourne. And on the back of COVID, I think bringing to life the history of one of the greatest public health initiatives in the nation at a time when Melbourne, which was one of the richest cities in the world, was in the firm grips of a cholera and typhoid epidemic. So that sets an important backdrop, I feel. And as contemporary art, T3, to me, is really a powerful medium that Melbourne Water continues to sort of leverage nicely to showcase the Western Treatment Plant, its landscape, and the operations. And as I was hearing Zanny talk, I should also add that while Spotswood and the main outfall sewer are decommissioned, have long been decommissioned, the Western Treatment Plant since 1897 continues to operate and evolve. So once again, that is a great testament to our forebearers. And I'll probably, from a business point of view, and I think we can't lose sight of the fact that this has to sort of really add value to the business. This is important, this collaboration. And so in terms of value to the business, the long-standing collaboration through treatment has helped shape new experiences and perspectives on the Western Treatment Plant for both staff and the public. And we can't forget staff, because often staff aren't aware of our history. I've been around for 36 years. I guess the nature of my role blends in nicely to understand the history, but generally speaking, the history is out of sight, out of mind. So treatment helps to re-engage and activate staff just as much as public. I think it's also inspired Melbourne Water to be progressive with particularly heritage interpretation, going from, or shifting way rather, from the traditional static approach to something perhaps a bit more dynamic, where using art to create an immersive and at times participatory experience beyond our wildest imagination. So every 2-3 years when Cameron and David knock on our door, we embrace them, and God knows what journey we go on to. So, but importantly, through its inception way back in 2015, treatment has connected us as a business with industry partners, being the artists, some of which have been here tonight, and these are people who ordinarily would be considered outside our normal operational realm. So that's important, and I think on that point alone, I think it's also transformational transformative for the business, and that connection, I feel, it sort of helps build advocacy for the Western Treatment Plant as much as Melbourne Water for the services that we provide. So we've got like I said, industry partners who ordinarily would not know much about the water industry. So through treatment, you get that exposure. And I think last, but certainly by no means least, is the other value which cannot be understated is connecting the general public, particularly activating the locals in the context of Werribee, which includes former workers and residents at the Western Treatment Plant. And I guess for me, is by way of just as a bit of a closing statement, treatment continues to be an integral part of transforming our understanding and appreciation of the Western Treatment Plant, which is a much maligned landscape for over 100 years. The stigma around the poo farm, like a contagion, just also washed over Werribee, where it was the butt of jokes for generations. So now, with the help of Deakin through treatment, increasingly we see WTP, the Western Treatment Plant, really as a gem of the West. And some of that transformation also washes across some of the operators at the Western Treatment Plant, where they see it as a facility, yet when they look at the artists and how they interact and engage, they jump on board. They actually embrace it. At first, they might be standoffish, but seeing that transformation, for me personally, I think it's actually gold.
Well, there is definitely that alchemy going on with what we do.
Indeed. Hey, thank you so much, Paul. And
No worries.
again, on behalf of CAM, you are literally a remarkable legend of public art in the West, because we work with a whole raft of different people, but your openness to experimentation and understanding the value of culture, not simply just didactic information about that treatment plant, is remarkable. And Paul, we genuinely love you. So yeah, just to acknowledge that in this meeting and in front of everybody else. Folks, we're going to keep moving, and I'm going to very quickly introduce the website, and also delighted to introduce Dr. Maria Bates, who has designed it and been our designer of all this amazing stuff, including awesome tiles behind us and the merch. Of course, it wouldn't be public art condition without merch. And so just quickly, in fact, Maria, just feel free to chip in too when I share the screen, because it's your baby, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So Maria, we were talking earlier today, and as unaccustomed as you are to talking in front of people and talking about the work you do, we talked about some of the prompts, I guess, for the imagery that you've come up with. So just briefly, if you could just take us through that thinking and the method.
Yeah, no worries. And thanks, Dave and Cam, for having me on board. It's been a really interesting journey to be part of the team for this treatment project. So I suppose, in having been a practicing designer and now an academic, a design academic, it's really rare that you actually get the opportunity to work in with a really creative event space like this. So I really have appreciated being on board. It was a really interesting learning curve for me. So someone that lives and grew up in the eastern suburbs, having sort of lived in northern and southeastern suburbs as well, I really wasn't any more aware of what goes on with our sewage treatment, apart from driving down through and the stigma attached to the Werribee Western Treatment Plant in Werribee. So prior to all this, I had really no idea that there was a pumping station. I really didn't know much about our sewage system at all. So being brought on board and being taken through the different areas in which this treatment project is taking place and the event is taking place, I found really, really interesting. One of the things I suppose that the brand and everything that I've done to sort of bring this to light was to make sure that sort of represented this invisible connection that the sewer pipeline has that brings Melbourne together across both east, like everywhere in Melbourne, but particularly down the western side of Melbourne. So the fact that these pipelines connect us all is kind of really interesting to me, and brings our community together in a sort of invisible way. So the branding itself then became the wireframe for housing this event, and also represents that invisible pipeline. I was really I was really considerate, or tried to be really considerate, that the brand itself needed to be kept simple and not distract from the artwork and the event itself, but highlight and actually bring some excitement to the project. Because of course, as the artists are building their work, we can't see it yet. We can't promote it as artwork until this public, because it's obviously very situational, in situ, and time sensitive. So we can't promote the work before it exists. So also wanting to make sure that there was enough level of excitement within the brand and the website and everything that that could sort of generate a level of excitement without, as I said, distracting from the artists and the work itself. Bringing down, obviously, like just as far as like the functionality of websites and making sure we have all the information, that's also really, really important. So I am a very functional based designer and wanted to sort of bring that to the project as well. We also wanted to bring the colour through from sort of the representation, as you can see from Cam's lovely merch, which is really not, it's a less unobtrusive than I think I initially thought the brand would be. By the time we have hats, t-shirts, things behind us, it's actually really not that invisible at all. But the colours represent sort of looking at obviously the yellow representing the contaminated sewage that that starts at the beginning of this process, through to the pure sort of almost drinkable water that happens as it gets through all the different processes and treatment processes down at the sewage plant. So that kind of summarises my process and the thoughts behind the brand itself, and obviously, yeah, how it all came together.
Well, thank you so much, Maria. And we should say that this will be linked up through the sites themselves via the signage we have. So there'll be a QR code that people can access through their phones to come to this site. Once works are documented, more information is going to, more material and information will be captured at this site for each artist and each artist's works. So as this project progresses over the next 5 weeks, please check in with the site, but also go to the sites, use the QR code, and find out more about these amazing projects that are going to be happening. And importantly, this gives you a schedule to map your kind of treatment journey to over the next 5 weeks. David, should we roll on to the video? We'll
roll on, but I just one little plug for the beautiful neon sign that sits behind us in our branding. It is actually a real neon sign that we've had fabricated. It's quite enormous. It doesn't fit in the car, which was a bit of a bummer. But it will look spectacular at our launch and at the various treatment events. So there is, you know, this.
Paul, we haven't told you that we want to hang it off the water tower. That's your backdrop.
The other thing I suppose I just would jump in here, and just when you direct to the website, as you scroll down both on the home page and in the event listing page, you will find the event program here, and this is where that you'll be able to find the information on each of the different events, the artists themselves, and clicking through. Cam, I can't go over that, but this is where you can also register to visit some of the events. So if you click into this one, for example, just to make sure that people understand how to sort of register, that sort of gets you through and then gives a bit of a background on what's going on, and also registering for the event, which can be important for some of our events. And you're then able to sort of get tickets for the events. They are free, but there are some sort of restrictions on numbers of people at some of the events. So yeah, please go through and register through the website.
We should say in the main they're free.
Oh, is there one that's not?
We're just talking about that.
I'm sorry about that. Okay.
Some is expensive, but just before we move on to the film, I think one thing that we just wanted to be really clear about. So, and we've introduced some of our artists, but not all of them. There are, as you can see from our list of artists here, we do have a swag of different artists participating in the program. We're doing 5 what we consider quite large commissions, and a 6th commission is this nocturnal night and day event happening at the end of the treatment program on the 21st and 22nd of April. And we've got a number of artists here with us tonight who are producing work in a very limited time window. But one thing we just wanted to really emphasize is that we've always done treatment during the day. It's always been a kind of daytime event. And we've always loved the idea of what it might mean to activate the site through art in nocturnal settings. So finally, thank you to Paul and Dinya and everybody at Melbourne Water for agreeing to the madness of this. We have a nocturnal dimension, which will be an evening, a night and day program taking place across the 21st and the 22nd of April. And on that note, Cam, how about we hit the video?
Okay, so if you stop sharing, I will. Okay, everyone. So there's been a lot of contributors here, from John Cumming, Megan Evans, Simon Rees. I've taken a lot of footage over the years, and yeah, this is a compendium of the things that have happened and a bit of a forecast to things that might happen. What have I done? I didn't share sound. Sorry, everyone. All right, so that video is going to go up on the website, I think, any day now. It kind of acts, I guess, in this program as a bit of a hinge point for what's gone before and what's to come, as well as being something that draws out the tension between the sites inside the Western Treatment Plant and what's happening outside the Western Treatment Plant. So I guess given that this project over the next 5 weeks, what it does outside is going to arrive like our waste in the plant on April 21. I've got an artist here who's making work yet again for Treatment 3. She's all decked out in her merch, Fiona Hillary, who actually ended up turning her last work. You would have seen that guitar work set in the water tower in 2017. That was extended into a PhD. So this is where the genuine research comes into play around what treatment has enabled. And I should say a number of PhDs have ended up coming out of the place. But maybe you could talk a little about your experience, Fiona.
Absolutely. The treatment plant made me a doctor, or maybe Cam and David and the treatment plant. But I guess being inducted first probably in 2016 to the site I think it runs in my blood now, and just like my blood and my urine and my feces that fly out into the ocean, it's part of how I think with the world, and it enabled me working on treatment and the affect of the works that came before. So Megan Evans' work in the water tower was spectacular, and I was really enamoured by the affect. But it also allowed me to dig a bit deeper about the human, non-human and more than human. And I think that's the trajectory across my work, from the water tower work and the durational electric guitar set list and the neon drawing into the glow and the reverberation through nature, where we find bioluminescent dinoflagellates.
Which is where we arrive at this Treatment 3 work, yeah.
And it's really exciting because the work comes back to site where it was originally filmed, where the sound recordings were made. So, and it invites participants on a kind of sci-fi journey of becoming dinoflagellates.
So when people arrive at Cockorock on April 21 and 22, they'll jump in a bus and they will be driven out to a far-flung site through some of the extraordinary technologies and landscapes that Melbourne Water play host to out at the Western Treatment Plant, to your work, which you'll be operating with a number of invigilators over what will end up being about 16 and a half hours. So we're really looking forward to that, Fiona. Thanks for being involved again.
Pleasure. And I think that 16 and a half hours represents the time it took to record the material that goes into the film as well. So there's so many synergies.
Yes. And talking of synergies, we do have one other artist here, Eugenia Lewis, who's kind of making a work that will resonate with the works that have previously gone in that water tower space. So we'd like to acknowledge the work that you're doing now, Eugenia. We may not have time to talk to you this evening, but we're looking forward to the improvised piano piece that you make with many piano players from the Wyndham area and around Melbourne on bringing something quite extraordinary into being over the day night, April 21, April 22. So thanks for being involved. I want to thank Fiona Lee for being here. We did want to talk to some of the people that are making work at the Western Treatment Plant, but we unfortunately may not have much more time. So I think we might have to answer some questions. Is that right, David?
Yeah, just before we do, I just wanted to obviously really press the April 5 launch at Scienceworks and Spotswood. We'd love people to come to that event. It's going to be really wonderful to launch those 3 projects and to raise a glass and to celebrate that and our partners. So that's April 5. All the details of registering are on the website. So please do yourself a favour. We'd love to see you there. And just very finally, I wanted to acknowledge and thank our immediate Public Art Commission team, many of whom are with us tonight. I'd like to acknowledge Cam, who's just an indefatigable, quite hard to say that, indefatigable presence for public art and for celebrating the West. And, you know, there's an enormous amount of his love and care in this project, and it's always a delight to work with him. And Maria, who's joined us tonight, who's just come in to work in the design space. Always a delight to have you, Maria. You're a wonderful colleague, and it's been great to have your incredible aesthetic richness in the project. I'd like to acknowledge Sarah Jones, our producer in this project, who has gone well beyond what any human being would ordinarily want to have to do to try and make this project happen. Delighted also that we've got Rachel Morley with us tonight. Rachel is our marketing and comms person. She makes us look special on social media, and she's a special person as well. So thank you, and congratulations to all of the amazing work you've done to make this happen. And Cam, I always miss someone, so come through for me if I've forgotten anybody.
Well, just to all our partners, I mentioned them earlier, but one partner that kind of bridges the two key sites, and they're about to do more work in Brooklyn, and that's Greening the Pipeline. Thanks for their advocacy on this project. But everyone else, we're really looking forward to the next 5 weeks and the adventures that brings. We've done some stress testing already. But and yet we feel confident that we can deliver something that is quite magical at times, and we're looking forward to hosting you. So thanks for joining us this evening, and we're really looking forward to seeing you on April 5 when we can talk in person outside of the Zoom room.
Fantastic. So thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend, and looking forward to seeing you out and about on our exciting adventures in the next 6 weeks. Thanks for coming.
Thanks.